we've got the wheel off the car, steering wheel off the car, and it's in a pretty bad state. As you can see, we've got big cracks with huge gaps here and here, then lots of little cracks. We've got small cracks running through here, and on the rear side you've got areas where it's just missing altogether, all the way around there. Big gap, you're seeing big gap, lots of small gaps, smaller cracks like that one there. So if I had to remold this, mold a new rim onto it, I'd have to have something to make a mold from. So either way, I'm going to have to restore the actual shape of this somehow with filler and epoxy and all sorts of things to get it so it's the right shape. So I'll do that, I'll paint it, and if it's okay, I'll use it. If it's not okay, I'll go on to the next step, which is to make a silicone mold. But this is the relatively easy, relatively cheap repair stage first. Now I'm using some aluminium tape. I've seen this on another YouTube video by somebody else. I don't know if you can see that there. You wrap it around and you form like a gutter, so that when you put the epoxy in, sure, it will drain back, but you can build it up till it's just slightly proud, and it just stops it all running away onto the table. So we're going to see how well that works now. I don't know if you can see that, but you can see there, it's made a reasonable puddle of resin. I may just bend that in a little bit so it's closer to the shape, a bit less filing required later. I mean, I could just wrap tape around it, but let's just let gravity take it down the other side. I'll probably have to come at the other side later. That's not bad. So I've never done this before, so these bigger gaps like this one here I'll probably continue to do this way. I'm going to repair this crack using the superglue and bicarbonate of soda method. Now you're supposed to use a needle, but what I'm doing is I'm just using some wire. I'm just stripping off the insulation at the end, and then we'll just keep a few of the copper strands. So we've got like a little prong here. I can get into the crack with it, and then I've just been doing this by trial and error, but what I do is if I flick, you get it all over the place. If you flick a bit of bicarb into the crack, get it into the crack as much as you can. Just be, this is what works for me anyway. Right, now if I put glue on this now, it'll glue itself everywhere, so try and get the bicarb to go into the crack. Just feed it in a bit more at the top. Okay, like that. And get rid of the excess, because you don't want the glue to track through it. So we just rub it off. Right, you see on my crack is full of, if you can see that, see how that crack is full of bicarbonate? Now the cunning bit is if you drop super glue into the crack, it reacts somehow with the bicarb and it sets like rock. But obviously you don't want bicarb all over, super glue all over the place, so you try and drop it in. There we are. Right, so I'm going to put a bit more bicarb on. and just try and get it. You see it's already set to the end of my piece of wire. There it is. Right, see how that's formed a kind of solid gunk in the crack. It's still a bit recessed, so I'll just try and build another layer up. Yeah, I don't know what it's like. It sets to like concrete. Run it along. You don't. So I started off carefully trying to get it into the crack, but this way seems better. You just sort of massage it in, and you waste some. So that will now react again. As it sets immediately, and then flick it off. Right, now you see there, that's all slightly higher than the surface. Just here there's a little recess, so I might build another layer on. That's filled the gap. It's slightly proud, which means I can sand it back, and I would say that's pretty good. That's really quite impressive to me anyway. This has turned out really well. Well, better than I thought it would. I wouldn't say really well. I've managed to get bicarbonate of soda just like all over the place, just everywhere. Yeah, the big voids have been filled in with the flexible JB Weld epoxy, and the cracks, you know, this sort of thing, filled in with the bicarbonate of soda and superglue method. A big missing piece here built up with bicarb, superglue, more bicarb, till I get a raised edge. So I'm going to have to sand this back. Most of the bits of missing plastic are actually on the rear side, so from the front it's not so bad. It's more a set of cracks which have been filled in. So there's just a huge amount of sanding now, and then see how smooth we can get it. Just feel them. If they're rough, file them with the tool. Just keep working your way around. Run your thumb like over the edge here. You can just feel where the raise points are and just file them down. I've sanded it all down. I've wiped it with paint thinner, as on the instructions of I'm using Rustoleum plastic primer. They're the instructions. So I've got it mounted on something where I can rotate it pretty easily. I'm masked off the centre, masked off the metalwork here, and so I'm just going to go for it now. See what happens in my makeshift paint booth. Well, you can see the primer coat. I've put about 5 coats on. It's come out pretty well. I mean, there's still the odd blemish, like if you get up really close. See the tiny cracks here that you can't really get the filler into very easily, but it looks miles better than it did. So I'm going to just rough this up again and then start with the top coat. This paint's pretty unusual, and it goes on a lot smoother than car paint. It doesn't run because it's got such volatile solvents in it that it sets within seconds. So all I do, well, I say set, it goes tacky very quickly. I can tell because I masked the centre off here. You can see my thumb's sticking to it already, just a couple of minutes after the last coat was put on. So I just slowly revolve it to stop any runs, although to be honest, if I didn't do this I think it'd still be okay, just for about 5 minutes after each coat, just to make sure there's no runs. But it's easier to put on than normal automotive paint, I would say. Clear coat, because I use Rustoleum crystal clear. Plan is a light coat to start off with, 10-minute gap, and then 2 slightly heavier coats with a 10-minute gap between those. Right, I'm trying to get enough on so it just looks continuously wet. So this is actually the 3rd coat. 3 coats of clear went on this, but you wouldn't know it. It's got like a dull finish. I've been reading up on this on Car Bodywork sites. That's actually quite normal. So what you actually have to do is wet sand it with something like 1500, 2000 grit, which is pretty smooth sandpaper first. Then you go down to 3000, and then you use a medium cutting compound, and then you go to a very fine cutting compound. Can't use a sanding tool, so I'm just using strips. Just doing sections, just work my way around. We've got G3, which is a sort of lightly, mildly abrasive compound. And then after that we go down to something that's extremely finely abrasive, G10 finishing compound. So let's see how we get on with those. Well, I wouldn't say you could see your face in it, but it has actually shined up. There's definitely a bit of a shine to it here and there. You can get bags of laminate, wood laminate offcuts quite cheaply on the internet, and this is his one with loads of little pieces of different colours. So what I've done is there's 3 recesses on the wheel that either had laminate in them or they were painted black. I'm not quite sure which. I've seen on maybe later models they had little laminate rectangles in them, so I've cut a template and then I cut these out and I've just varnished them. There we go. I think that looks pretty good. I worked this out in the end from the horn press ring. These inserts were actually pieces of metal, very thin, glued in with a kind of painted on wood effect. On my horn ring, 1 or 2 of them were still there. Here and here they'd long gone. So I've put these lighter colour inserts in, and then I've done the horn ring inserts to match. So we end up with a reasonably nice looking steering wheel. Well, it's not perfect, but it's massively better than what we had before. So I'm pretty pleased with that.